this in a little bit of context first. The ultimate part, the core part of your assignment is that it is a feasibility study. That means you have to come to a conclusion as to whether this business is going to work well in the future or isn't. And you're going to do this from the perspective of, should we invest in this company, thinking that our investment will last for a long time. Right? Is it going to be a great company in 15 years, 10 years, that sort of time frame? That's the question we're asking. And this model, done by Michael Porter, talks about 5 factors that might impact on a business's profitability. And I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to give you a little example with Uber of what those 5 factors might be. Right? I don't think Uber is a great online company to choose as much as it is a fascinating business. The problem is, because it's not listed publicly at this stage, there's not a huge amount of information available. I was even reading one article on the newspaper on the weekend, and they were talking about it making a $400 billion loss over an accounting period. They didn't even know whether that was for 3 months or 12 months. So there's just not a lot of information about them. But I'm going to use them as an example to give you like a little model to work from. So there were 5 forces that Porter said were important in terms of how likely a company is going to be able to increase its profits in the future by raising prices. So if we start here, it says, how much bargaining power do suppliers have to the business? Okay, that means if you think about all the inputs to your business, are they really big companies that have got a lot of control over you? For example, if you had a Coca-Cola vending machine and your supplier is Coke, I would say to you that Coke has got a lot of power because they're the #1 soft drink, most people want it. You can't really tell them to lower their prices. They're a massive company and they really don't care if you go and put something else in your vending machine because it's not going to impact them. So Coke, to someone who owns a vending machine, would be an example of a supplier that had a lot of power.
Wait, really? So like people can, it's like, can people invest in vending machines?
Yeah, people could.
That's
So there you go. So there's and you see around one of the things when I went to Japan that fascinated me was they had, just on the streets, they had cigarette vending machine and beer vending machines.
Yeah, but it's different culture. People are like
Different culture, yeah. But I don't think that'll work real well in Australia. That's my feeling. Right, so that's an example of a supplier who might have a lot of bargaining power. A example of a supplier that may not have all that much bargaining power. In Australia, think about Woolworths and Coles. Right? If you were a supplier to Woolworths and Coles, you don't have a lot of power because certainly up to now there haven't been many other options that you could sell your food through. Right? That's changing a little bit with IGA becoming a slightly bigger brand, Aldi becoming a slightly bigger brand, and Costco, but still dominated by Woolworths and two. So in those cases, suppliers don't have a lot of power. So that's the first thing. How much power do your suppliers have? The next thing is, are there the possibility of new entrants in your business? Okay. How easy is it for a new entrant? So let's think about a business where we might say it's not all that easy. We haven't had all that many new airlines start up in Australia. We've had a few. We've had Compass that started and failed, and we've got 3 airlines now. We've got Qantas, Virgin and Tiger. Jetstar is a Qantas airline, so it's owned by Qantas. But we haven't had any new ones, and there's a lot of reasons why that might be important. The first thing is economies of scale. Right, well, if you're an airline, you can't just buy part of a plane to start flying with it. You have to spend $100 million, $150 million, or spend that much on a lease to start with an airline that might give you a couple of hundred seats. Brand identity. Right? I think this is pretty important in airlines. People are going to be careful about who they trust to fly with. So Qantas has a pretty good brand. Virgin, similarly, no big problems yet. Government policy, you've got to get through the regulators to start an airline. And initial funding requirements where you need a bunch of money to do that. Whereas a new entrant, if you've got a cafe, that's a lot easier for a new entrant to come in. Right? They have to lease a building and they pay some costs, but not as hard as starting up an airline. Okay, bargaining power of buyers. how many buyers are there? Are there a lot? Right? And are there costs for buyers to switch? So an example where buyers have some costs in switching are banks. Right? Because it takes a bunch of time. If you want to switch, I've just switched my home loan from one bank to another. It takes quite a lot of time to do all the paperwork, and there are some financial costs involved and so on. So that means people are less inclined to switch banks. Right? And the other one down there is it something people are price sensitive about? So that means, is your service or product something people really look hard at price for? So maybe fast food might be something that's very price sensitive, whereas an elite restaurant that you go to once a year as a celebration after the formal, something like that, people might say, oh, well, I'm not so worried, this is a night we're going to splurge and spend a little bit of money. Right. How much competition is there in the industry? Up until now, a lot of people would have said supermarket, there wasn't a huge amount of competition. It's just Coles and Woolworths, and then both making billion-dollar profits. Whereas in other areas, we'd say they're highly competitive. So another example might be cars have changed enormously in Australia over the past 30 years. There's now a whole range of cars from around the world and a bunch of cars that sell for less than $20,000. So that's become a whole lot more competitive. Right? What's the cheapest car on the market at the moment in Australia? Does anyone know?
My car?
Cheapest new car? Yeah, I think. Sorry? Yeah, the little Hyundais. Yeah. Yep. So it's becoming, competition is very intense there. In other areas, maybe supermarkets, maybe even airlines, people would say there's less competition there. And now the ability of switching to a substitute product. Okay, so substitute product means, let's think about a trip to Sydney. So we might think the first thing we might do is we might jump on our favourite airline and go to Sydney. But there are substitutes. We could drive down to Sydney if we wanted. So the substitute is using our car paying for petrol. We could get on a bus and go down by bus. We can get a train and go down. So there are substitute products there that people can go on to. There are other areas where there won't be so many substitute products. For example, medical procedures. There probably aren't as many options. If you need to have your appendix out, that's probably the only thing you've got to do, and you'll have to pay whatever costs come along that way. You might say, however, public hospital system, a substitute there might be to go into the private hospital system and pay for your private health insurance and have some extra costs. So let's have a look at how this works for Uber. Okay, just so you get an example of how you apply it, because these are important to say how strong are these forces and what do they mean. So let's start with suppliers. How much bargaining power do we think the suppliers have? I'm going to say it's low. So the suppliers are drivers and the computer apps, right? And low bargaining power does everyone agree that really the drivers individually, there's drivers all around the world, there's hundreds of thousands of drivers, I don't think they have a whole lot of power. Now, I'm going to pop this up on sector, so I don't feel you have to copy it down. Right. So the key word here that I'll emphasise is I think they've got fairly low bargaining power. Right, that's my conclusion. I might be wrong. Possibility of new entrants. I think the possibility of new entrants, I'm going to go low, medium or high. I think it's at least medium. So it's likely to be easy. So there's nothing that says that Tom this afternoon can't go home and can't set up his own ride-sharing app. Right? And so tripwithtom.com.au, where you download your app, it becomes a simpler thing.
Down good business idea, like names and stuff?
Not to Tom lends itself to that. I think he'd work well on that model. So I think it is pretty easy to copy at this stage. Okay, I would say the but on that is Uber brand is very well known. Right, a lot of people know about Uber. In fact, if you think about the fact that no one actually knows about yellow and black and white taxis once you get outside Australia, that Uber brand is known all around the world. So they've done a pretty good job. And that makes it hard for someone to come in. Take a ride with tom.com.au has got a real problem in that everyone thinks of Uber when they think of getting a ride. They don't think of take a ride with tom.com.au. Okay. Now, bargaining power of buyers. So we just want to emphasise the word. We're saying it's medium. Right. So the possibility of new entrants is medium. Bargaining power of buyers, I think it's quite low.
Is it because they rely on it as well?
Yeah.
Hey, sir, have you,
On the lower Uber prices. Yeah, sorry.
do you really, like, how do you pay the Ubers? Is it in cash or is it like a completely online?
I believe you pay through your app. I'm pretty sure. I've never been on an Uber trip.
Because I was really confused. The time I got in an Uber, I didn't see any money whatsoever, so I was like, so confused.
Yeah, I think you pay.
Literally just like the person's car. Like the app pays the people. It's like not like a taxi house, taxi house like a little box that like counts.
Okay, so yeah, you pay through the app. Okay, next one. Intensity of competition in the industry. I only think at this stage it's moderate because who are your biggest competitors?
Like a taxi.
It's taxis, right? But taxis are a fair bit more expensive, right? So I think it's moderate.
Would you say then taxi is kind of less, not less reliable, but less, like an Uber is so quick, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, okay, so you're saying that,
comes straight away.
But like with the taxi, you can literally put your arm out. Not really in Brisbane because we don't have
Yeah.
okay, you can,
I guess, like,
yeah. So there is that ability to hail a taxi you don't have for Uber, but you're saying maybe they come really quickly with the app. Okay, intensity of competition, I'd say moderate with taxis at this stage are more expensive. And this is something I hear a lot from people who use Uber, is that they wouldn't be able to use a taxi normally. Okay, it's just that the Uber is so much cheaper. So we're going to say the key word here is we're going to say moderate, and substitute products available. There's a moderate number. Okay, so that includes public transport, own car. Right, so there's a moderate number that's available, but there's different things that make Uber suitable at different times. So, for example, if you've been drinking, you really probably aren't going to want to walk a long way. You aren't going to want to drive your own car, and so suddenly Uber becomes a little bit easier. So you would look at all these forces, right? And you would say, actually, there's a reasonable opportunity at this stage that Uber is reasonably attractive, and that gives them a reasonable opportunity to raise their prices. Okay, so maybe we just should go back to do just one last thing here. I just might say low is good here. I think in all of them low is good. Yeah, low is good. Fewer is good here. And so I'll just add that so you know what you're looking for. But if you've got mainly low and moderate, that means it's a pretty attractive business. Okay, and you've got 3 in the medium and 2 in the low range. So you'd say, yeah, maybe that suggests that there are some real positive things to come out of it. Any questions from you guys? Vrushka,
How long an Uber would be like for taxi?
you do or don't?
You don't.
I think it's in the middle.
Oh, what? No.
What the?
I think the problem with Uber is,
No, like you know how a taxi?
yeah,
If you had an Uber, it would just be hitchhiking.
think of. If I had an Uber,
Yeah, no, you're right, it will be.
Yeah, I think I'm not using
It's
my
like you put your arm out and then like this, and then whoever stopped was actually an Uber driver, it would just be hitchhiking.
yeah. Now, you might pick some issues out of this, okay? And you might say, well, I think a real problem here is how likely the Uber model is to be copied, right? How easy it can be to set up a take a ride with tom.com.au downloadable app and can go with that. And so I think that's a problem, and you might talk a little bit more about what Uber should do to make sure that that isn't a problem, okay, or how they might work on that. They might want to lobby governments to make it really hard for the next ride-sharing app to go. And there's still a real question about the legality of it. There have been drivers who've been arrested and charged in Queensland. It's uncertain how it's all going to play out.
But at the same time, there's, taxi drivers. I have a family relative who some taxi driver attempted to rape her when she was on the way home.
Yeah, yes, it's an industry that doesn't necessarily have the
It's not exactly
best reputation anyway. And a lot of the risks in Uber are the same as with taxis.
Yeah.
And I've often, when you look at the criticism of Uber, the criticism's often that they haven't got a proper licence and they may not have the right insurance as well. If Uber went about putting those things in place and the security checks and stuff like that, if Uber went about and really did that effectively and cheaply, they could have a really difficult business model to copy. Tom?
Wouldn't they just become a taxi service?
Well, that's true. Is part of the reason they can charge a lower price because they've got a little less red tape around the business, a few less hoops that they feel they have to jump
They
through.
don't pay any tax because they're an overseas company. They
Okay, yeah,
operate
tax could be something. But then they could also fix that and say, well, maybe we're better off getting into Australia, paying a bunch of tax, so we become important for the government, and then they'll be more likely to protect us from other new entrants. So look, I'll leave it there.